I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. My heart was racing, but I couldn't bring myself to pick up. It had been years. Years of silence, years of wondering, years of pain. And now, after all this time, here he was, calling me again. Ben, I should have ignored it. I should have let it go to voicemail, but I couldn't. My finger moved without thinking. The screen lit up, and there he was, his name flashing across the screen like a ghost from my past. I took a deep breath. My chest felt tight. I pressed the button. Hello? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hesitant, cautious, unsure. There was a long pause on the other end. My heart pounded as I waited, the silence stretching between us, suffocating. Then I heard his voice. That familiar voice that I hadn't heard in so long. Sophie, he said, his tone soft but urgent. I need to talk to you. Please, just hear me out. I froze. My hand gripped the phone tighter, my nails digging into my skin. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, relief, confusion. It was all there, swirling in my chest. I stayed silent, waiting for him to say more. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him everything he had done to me, how he left without a word, without a warning, how I had spent months, years, trying to understand why he had just walked away. But instead, I stayed quiet. Sophie, I know I've hurt you, he continued, his voice breaking. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you, please, can we try again? I've made so many mistakes. I regret everything. I've never stopped loving you. I was stupid. I'm sorry. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Regret, apologies, the same words I had begged to hear for so long, but now they felt hollow. Too little, too late. Ben, I whispered, the name tasting bitter on my tongue. Why now? After everything? Why are you calling me now? There was another long pause. I could hear him breathing, his voice shaky. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I thought I could find happiness without you, but I was wrong. I was miserable. I want you back, Sophie. His words hit me like a wave. My mind raced, flashing back to everything that had led to this moment. The hurt, the abandonment, the empty promises. All those nights I had stayed up crying, asking myself what had gone wrong. All those unanswered questions. But now he wanted me back. Now he was asking for forgiveness. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I was feeling. All I could hear was the pounding of my heart in my ears. I don't know what to say, I finally said, my voice cracking. I was shaking now, the tears threatening to spill. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can forget what you did. He let out a shaky breath. I understand. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'll do whatever it takes, Sophie. Please, just let me try. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him to leave me alone. But another part, Maybe a part that had never really let go of him wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that after all this time, he was still the man I had loved. But the question remained, why now? What had changed? And was it enough to make up for everything that had come before? I could feel the weight of his words, the weight of the years that had passed, pressing down on me. Would I ever truly be able to forgive him? Would I ever be able to move forward with him, knowing the hurt he had caused? I didn't have the answers. Not yet. I don't know why I never saw it coming. Looking back now, it seems so obvious, so painfully clear. But in that moment, I was blindsided. I remember the day Ben told me he wanted to separate like it was yesterday. The air between us had been thick for weeks. There was something off, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, but I kept trying to ignore it. I told myself we were just going through a rough patch. Relationships have ups and downs, right? We'd been together for so long, so I refused to believe that the love we had built could just fade away like that. But it did. I came home from work that evening, expecting to see him in the kitchen, maybe making dinner or lounging on the couch with the TV on. Instead, I found him sitting on the edge of the couch, his head in his hands. I could see it, the sadness in his posture, the weight of something unspoken hanging in the air. I walked over to him, trying to make sense of the look on his face. "Ben," I said softly, almost afraid of what I might hear. He didn't look up at first. His shoulders were hunched, and for a second, I felt a pang of fear. Something wasn't right. Something was wrong with him, with us. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes met mine, and I could see the pain in them. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was something deeper, something I couldn't quite grasp at that moment. I think we need some space," he said quietly, almost too quietly. My heart skipped a beat. "Space?" I echoed, not sure I understood what he meant. "What do you mean?" "We can work through this, Ben." "I know we can." He shook his head, his gaze never leaving mine. "No, Sophie. I need more than just a little time apart. I need to find myself again. I've lost myself, and I don't know where I'm going anymore." The words hit me like a slap. I remember feeling my chest tighten, my throat closing up. "What do you mean, find yourself? What happened to us, Ben?" I couldn't stop the tears from welling up, but I tried to stay composed, tried to hold it together. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up slowly, pacing in front of me. "I don't know, Soph. I don't know who I am anymore. I can't be the person you need me to be when I'm so lost." The weight of his words hit me like a wave, drowning me in confusion and hurt. "You're not lost, Ben. You're right here. We're right here together. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, we can talk more, we can—" "No," he interrupted gently but firmly. "I've thought about it. I've thought about this a lot. I don't want therapy. I don't want more talking. I need to be on my own for a while." His voice trembled as he spoke, but his words were final. The decision was made, and I was too late to change his mind. I felt like the ground was being pulled out from beneath me. The love of my life, my partner, my best friend, was telling me he couldn't be with me anymore. Not because of anything I had done, but because he was lost, and he needed space to figure it out. It felt like a gut punch, the air knocked out of my lungs. All I could do was stand there, frozen, unable to move or speak. My mind raced, but my body felt numb. How did we get here? I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg him to stay, to tell him I would do anything, that I would change, that I could fix whatever had gone wrong. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about me. It was about him. He didn't even know what he wanted anymore. So that's it, I finally managed to say. My voice was barely a whisper. You're just going to walk away? I'm not walking away, Sophie, he said, his eyes welling with tears. I just need to figure things out. I can't be with you until I do. And then, just like that, he was gone. He packed a few things and left that night. He didn't come back the next day, or the next. The space he needed turned into weeks, then months. I reached out to him, tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't answer. It was like he had disappeared from my life completely. The pain was unbearable at first. I couldn't understand how someone I had spent so many years with could just leave. The life we had built, the memories we had made, the love we had shared, all of it seemed to evaporate with no explanation. I threw myself into work, into anything that would distract me from the hurt. I tried therapy. I tried dating again, though it felt like I was betraying the love I still had for him. Nothing worked. The hole he left in my life was still there, haunting me every day. And now here I was, sitting in my apartment all these years later, surrounded by the remnants of our past old photos, gifts he had given me, even the sweater he used to wear. I held one of the photos in my hand, staring at it, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. That's when my phone rang. And that's when everything changed again. I set the photo down, wiped my eyes, and stared at the screen. Then, the man who walked away. The man who said he needed space. The man who had broken me. And now, he was back. The first few months after Ben left were a blur. I couldn't tell if I was coming or going. I threw myself into work-long hours, late nights, anything to keep my mind off the emptiness. But even in the middle of a busy day, I felt the hollow ache in my chest. It didn't matter how many files I organized or emails I sent. It never went away. At night, when I was alone in the quiet apartment, it was worse. I'd curl up on the couch, staring at the TV, but not really watching. The silence was deafening. I had to fill the space somehow, so I started running. I started with small jogs around the block, then longer runs as the days went by. It wasn't about getting fit, it was about doing something, anything, to take my mind off the pain. My legs would burn, my lungs would ache, but it felt like I was making progress in some way. Slowly, I began to feel stronger, more alive. I started going to therapy too. I wasn't sure what I expected from it, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Talking about the breakup, about the pain Ben's departure caused, helped at least a little. It wasn't easy, though. Every time I spoke his name, I felt like I was opening up a wound that hadn't fully healed. But slowly, the weight started to lift, even if just a little. I also rediscovered parts of myself that I had buried for years. Things I had forgotten about during the relationship, things I had pushed aside in favor of building a life with someone else. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I dusted off my old sketchbook, and it felt like I was breathing again, like I was reconnecting with the woman I used to be before everything with Ben. But there were still days when I couldn't shake the loneliness. The nights when the quiet was too much and I'd find myself reaching for my phone, half expecting Ben's name to pop up on the screen, even though I knew deep down that he was long gone. On those nights, I missed him. I missed the sound of his voice, the warmth of his touch. I missed the comfort of knowing that someone loved me, flaws and all. I missed the intimacy, the feeling of being truly seen. Still, I pressed on. I kept pushing through the sadness, kept moving forward. I began to accept that the woman I was becoming didn't need Ben in order to be whole. One evening, I decided to go on a date. It wasn't about replacing him or trying to make things right with someone else. It was about taking a small step towards healing. The date was simple, a coffee shop with a man named Sam. He wasn't anything extraordinary, but for the first time in a long while, I found myself smiling, talking, feeling like I could be happy without Ben. That night, after the date, I came home with a smile on my face. I didn't feel the need to compare him to Ben. He was just Sam, a new person in my life. And I realized something important: I was worthy of love. I didn't need Ben to define who I was or what I deserved. I could stand on my own, and that felt like freedom. Over time, I started meeting more people, going on more dates. Some didn't work out, but others became friendships, and some were just fun distractions. Every time I met someone new, I grew a little more confident, a little more sure of myself. I laughed more, I danced more, I lived more. Eventually, the sadness wasn't so constant. It didn't creep into every corner of my mind. The pain wasn't gone, not entirely, but it wasn't the only thing I knew anymore. Ben was a part of my past, but he no longer consumed my every thought. I was building a life without him, a life that was my own. I sat one evening, sipping a glass of wine and reflecting on everything I'd been through. The hurt, the healing, the moments of doubt and triumph. And I realized something: I had come so far. I had grown in ways I never imagined possible. I wasn't the same person I was when Ben walked out that door, but maybe that was a good thing. I wasn't sure what the future held. I didn't know if I would ever love like I loved him, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. My story wasn't over. It had only just begun. I was just getting used to the quiet. The steady rhythm of my life felt like something I had earned after everything I'd been through. Therapy had helped me unravel the knots in my heart, and I finally found peace. I had my routines, my friends, my hobbies. I even had moments of joy, real joy, that didn't involve wondering where Ben was or what he was doing. My life was mine again. But that peace was shattered one afternoon when I heard a knock on my door. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I hadn't been keeping up with many of the people from my past. So, when I opened the door, I didn't expect to see him standing there. Ben, he looked different. His hair was grayer than I remembered, his face worn, more tired than the last time I saw him. His clothes weren't as sharp, his usual polished appearance replaced by a more disheveled look. But the most noticeable difference was his eyes. They were no longer filled with the confidence I once knew. They were empty, broken. "Sophie," he said softly, his voice full of hesitation. "Can I talk to you?" My stomach turned. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't believe he was standing there after everything. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind racing. I didn't expect to see you," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at his shoes like he was gathering the courage to speak. Then he looked back up at me, his eyes brimming with regret. "I know I don't deserve this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I need you to hear me out, please. I've made the biggest mistake of my life." I stepped back, allowing him to come in, though I wasn't sure I wanted him there. I hadn't prepared for this. I had spent so long moving on, building a life without him. Now, here he was, asking for something I didn't know if I could give. He sat down on the couch, his hands trembling slightly. I've been miserable, Sophie. I don't even know who I am anymore. I was selfish. I walked away from the best thing that ever happened to me, and now I'm paying for it. Every day. I thought I could live without you. I was wrong. I was stupid. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to hear him out, to understand what had driven him to this point. But another part of me was angry, furious, even. How could he just show up now after all this time? After everything? I've thought about this day every moment since I left. He continued, his voice breaking. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Sophie. I don't expect that. I need you to know how sorry I am. How much I regret everything. I stayed silent. My eyes were on him, but my mind was elsewhere, grappling with the weight of his words. I couldn't deny the sadness in his eyes. I couldn't deny that a part of me still cared for him, still wished things could have been different. But I wasn't the same person I was when he left. I had changed, I had grown, and I didn't know if I could go back to the way things were. The road I had walked to get here had been long, painful, and isolating. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, and now he wanted to come back into my life. "Ben," I finally said, my voice calm but heavy, "you can't just walk back into my life after everything. After you left without even a word. You left me to pick up the pieces of my own heart." His eyes filled with tears, and he nodded, swallowing hard. I know I don't deserve another chance. I don't expect you to take me back, but please, I needed you to know how sorry I am." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive him, or if I even could. The silence between us was thick, heavy with unspoken words, unhealed wounds. It was in that silence that I realized I wasn't the person who needed fixing anymore. I had moved on. I had found a new version of myself. But Ben? He was still stuck in the past, begging for a chance that I wasn't sure I could give him. "Ben, I need time," I said softly. "I need time to think." And with that, the door to the past creaked open again. But this time, I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk through it. The days that followed Ben's visit were a blur of emotions. I couldn't stop replaying everything he had said, his apologies, his brokenness. But I also couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me had changed. Something permanent. And it wasn't just the time that had passed, it was the woman I had become in that time. I spent hours reflecting, sitting alone in my apartment, staring out the window. I thought back to all the years we spent together, good and bad. The love we had was real, but it was also tainted with so much pain. I had been so desperate for his affection, so willing to put up with his emotional distance. I used to beg for his attention, for scraps of the love I thought we shared. I tolerated it, telling myself that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. But they never did. I remembered the endless nights of loneliness, the hollow feeling in my chest as I lay awake, wondering where he was or if he even cared. I remembered how, time and time again, I had tried to reach out, to fix things, to keep us together. But Ben had always pulled away, never fully present. He had chosen his own path, and I had been left behind. That was the hardest part to reconcile now. His words, his apology, they were all too little, too late. The betrayal stung, even now. I had spent so much of myself trying to make it work, and in the end, he had walked away without a second thought, and now, years later, he was asking for something I didn't know I could give. I wasn't that same woman anymore. The one who would cry herself to sleep, begging for his love. The one who would sacrifice her own happiness just to keep him around. I had rebuilt myself. Slowly, piece by piece, I had learned to love myself again. I had learned to stand on my own 2 feet. And in doing so, I had come to realize something incredibly important. I deserved more than what he had given me. I deserve someone who would never leave me in the first place. Someone who would cherish me from the start, not just when they realized I was worth something. I deserve someone who would love me before it was too late. And as much as it hurt, I knew deep down that I couldn't go back to him. His words, as sincere as they seemed, couldn't erase the past. And the past was filled with so many broken pieces that could never be put back together. I called him. I knew I had to face him. The conversation we were about to have would change everything. And I wasn't sure I was ready, but I couldn't keep dragging this out. I met him at the cafe where we'd once spent hours talking, laughing. It felt like another lifetime. Then I started, my voice steady but heavy with emotion. I've thought about everything you said, and it means something that you regret how things ended. But the truth is, I can't go back to the past. I've worked too hard to heal, to move forward. I'm not the same person who would settle for less than what I deserve. He looked at me, his eyes filled with sadness, but there was something else too understanding. It was as if he knew what I was about to say. I'll always care for you, I continued, swallowing the lump in my throat. You were an important part of my life, but I've learned that I can't keep living in the shadows of what we were. We can't keep holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore. His face fell, the weight of my words sinking in. He looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to find some way to change my mind. But there was nothing left to say. The decision was made. I'm sorry, he whispered. And I was too. But this was the end of our story, and I was finally ready to close that chapter for good. I know, I said softly. I know. And just like that, the door to the past closed for good. The air between us was thick with finality. The weight of the years, the pain, the love and betrayal, it all hung in the silence of the cafe, lingering like smoke that refused to dissipate. Ben didn't say anything more. He just stood there, his eyes a mix of regret and acceptance. I could see that he knew this was the end, that no matter how hard he had tried to come back, I couldn't undo what had been done. I wish you the best, Ben, I said, my voice calm but firm. I truly do, but I need to move forward with my life. I need to do it on my own terms. The words felt both freeing and heavy, like they were cutting a string that had tied me to him for so long. It wasn't the kind of release I'd expected, but it was necessary. This was the moment I had to say goodbye for both of us. Ben nodded slowly, his face a mask of quiet sorrow. There were no more words to say, no more apologies that could undo the years of emotional neglect. I didn't hate him. I didn't even feel anger anymore. But I had learned enough to understand that love alone wasn't enough to hold a relationship together. It wasn't just about saying I'm sorry when everything had already fallen apart. It was about action, consistency, and respect, all things that had been missing for too long. He turned to leave, his footsteps heavy and slow as he walked away from me, from us. And as I watched him disappear down the street, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't fully process right away: relief, sadness, a quiet ache. But above all, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: closure. I sat back in my chair, the silence around me almost comforting now. It was as if the world had paused for a moment, allowing me to breathe, allowing me to take in everything that had just happened. This was it. This was the last goodbye. I had spent so long holding onto the idea of Ben, of what we could have been, of the life we almost had. But now I was finally letting go. I realized that I had been carrying his absence like a heavy weight on my shoulders for too long. And by letting him go, I was freeing myself. It wasn't easy. I wasn't naive enough to think that it would be. But I also wasn't the same woman I was when Ben first left. I had fought for myself. I had found pieces of me that I thought I had lost forever. I had learned to love myself, to stand on my own, to create a life that was mine, not defined by anyone else. I thought back to the pain, the heartache, and the loneliness I had endured. It had all led me here to this moment, and in some strange way, I was thankful for it. Because without the struggle, without the tears, I would have never known my own strength. I would have never discovered what I was truly capable of. As I sat in the cafe, I smiled softly to myself, a feeling of peace washing over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when I realized that my life was mine to shape. I wasn't a victim of my circumstances anymore. I was the author of my own story. Ben was part of my past. A chapter that had ended, a lesson learned. And now it was time for me to start writing the next chapter. With a deep breath, I stood up, ready to step into my future. I didn't know exactly what it would look like, but I was excited. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope. My journey wasn't over, it had only just begun. And as I walked out of the cafe, I knew that I was finally in control of my own life, my own happiness. I wasn't looking back anymore. The door to my past was closed. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, I realized that I was free. As I watched Ben disappear down the street, I couldn't help but ask myself, what if I had said yes? What if I had given him that second chance? Would things have been different? But then I remembered something important: sometimes letting go is the only way to heal. Sometimes the hardest decision is the right one. So, what about you? If your past love came back, asking for another shot, would you take them back? Or would you walk away, choosing your peace over the pain? It's a tough question, and I know there's no easy answer. I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation like mine? What did you choose? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story. And if you want more stories like this, stories about love, loss, and the journey to healing, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Together we can continue learning, growing, and embracing the power of our own stories. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the hardest goodbyes are the ones that lead to the most powerful new beginnings.